Good morning. All right, we're going to try to do the book of Micah, chapter 1, using the PowerPoint along with the audio system. So this will be the first time. So we're going to try this out and see how well this works. And if it works, then we'll do it again in the future. So we are in book of Micah, chapter 1, verses 1 to 16. And Micah has been an interesting study. Um, Hosea, Amos, we saw a lot of prediction as to what was going to happen in the near future, with a little bit in the far future. But with Micah, we're going to find that he foretells and forthtells so much more than Hosea or Amos. And you'll see that as we get into it. So it says, the word of the Lord came to Micah of Morsheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Judah. Excuse me, Samaria and Jerusalem. Now, Micah, the word Micah is an abbreviation of Micaiah, as you can see here in the middle there. So it'd be kind of like Ken is Kenneth, Pat is Patricia, Barb is Barbara. Micah, full name would be Micaiah, but there's also Micaiah in the scriptures that we'll see a little bit later. But for right now, we'll take a look. So where did he live? He lived in Morsheth, Gath, right here. So when you look at this, there's Jerusalem, and there's the area around Morsheth. Now, you're going to hear, as we get into later on verses, maybe about verse 10 and so forth, you're going to hear Lachish, you're going to hear Gath, you're going to hear another number of other cities. And for the ones that we can identify and know where they are, they're all in this area right here. So let me try this little marker right here. Let's change that to this. Here we go. So they're all in this area is where they're located. And that becomes extremely important as you look at the study of Micah, because as you do, you find out that those cities become very important in this study. All right, so next we have the map that we have seen so many times. And let me turn this thing off so I don't scribble up the screen. So we started out with Hosea. And we said that Hosea prophesied during the time of Jeroboam all the way down to the end. And we know that Hosea prophesied right to the very end of the northern kingdom. The next, we went into Amos. And Amos in the scripture says he prophesied during the reigns of Amaziah, Uzziah, and Jotham. And he also prophesied during Jeroboam II. So his prophecy was very short. It was the idea of coming in, doing the job, and getting out of there. And when he was accused by one of Jeroboam's people of, go back to Jerusalem and your country and talk to them, he said, hey, I'm not a prophet. I wasn't the son of a prophet. I'm not raised a prophet. I'm a cowboy. And if you look at the way the scriptures read, that's what he was. But he had the message from the Lord to give this prophecy, and he was going to do it. Then the next one that we got into was Jonah. Now we know that Jonah lived during the time of Jeroboam because he's the one that predicted to Jeroboam that there was going to be real growth, even though Jeroboam was a rotten king and all of them in the northern kingdom were rotten. He was predicting from the Lord that Jeroboam would grow, and they really did. Okay, so where are we today? Well, we're getting into Micah. And Micah is an interesting person. As I said before, he prophesied during the time of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. Now, all the information I'm reading indicates it was probably near the beginning of the reign of Hezekiah. But and that's the only ones that he mentions in the opening of his chapter that we're going to see. But what's true is that if he prophesied during Jotham and Ahaz and the beginning of Hezekiah, then he also prophesied during the end of the northern kingdom. And the difference between Micah and Hosea and Amos is that he prophesies against both the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. So he did the same prophecy that the other two did as far as the northern kingdom, but he added in the southern kingdom. I'm going to take some water. Okay, so Now we come down here and we look at, okay, who else was involved here? Well, it's interesting. Micah is a mini Isaiah. And I say that very, very respectfully, because when we get to the very end of these PowerPoints, the last PowerPoint that you're going to see is a combination of, to compare this verse in Micah to this verse in Isaiah, and this verse in Micah to this verse in Isaiah. And he's a mini Isaiah. So the other person that comes into play here, now you don't see it in the book of Micah, but you most certainly see it in the book of Jeremiah, is that Jeremiah's life was saved by Micah's prophecy. Because, and you'll see this as we get into it in a couple of verses later on, is that Micah predicted the end of the southern kingdom. And when Jeremiah predicted the end of the southern kingdom, they wanted to kill him. They said, you're despairing the city, you're despairing our temple, you need to die. And the elders said, Micah predicted the exact same thing during his time, and they didn't kill him. So, no, we're not going to kill this man. All right, let's go back and look at this again. The word of the Lord came to Micah of Moresheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, which he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. So we're going to talk about that in a couple of seconds. Now you'll see here that Micah, his abbreviated name was Micaiah. Well, you know about him. If you go to 1 Kings chapter 22, this was the great story. Jehoshaphat was the king of the southern kingdom, and Ahab, Ahab and Jezebel, Ahab was the king of the northern kingdom. And they're getting together, and Ahab says, hey, Ramoth Gilead is our country, our area, and the Syrians have it. Let's go take them out. Will you join me and go take out the Assyrians and get that country back to us? And Jehoshaphat says, I'm with you. We're one. We're going to do it. But can we talk to the Lord first? And so Ahab calls all his prophets, and they're, of course, company paid, and they all say wonderful things about how successful he's going to be. And Jehoshaphat says, no, can't we get a prophet of the Lord? And Ahab says, well, I got this guy named Micaiah. I hate him. And he said, why? And he said, because he never says good things about me. And he said, no, you shouldn't say that. So they bring Micaiah in, and Micaiah is a riot. Micaiah comes in and goes, yeah, just do it, man. Go get it. Yeah, go. Nice going. Great job. And Ahab realizes he's mocking him. And he said, would you tell me the truth? And then Micaiah told him the truth. And one guy slapped him and said, where'd the Spirit of the Lord tell you that one came from? And Micaiah said, you'll know when you're in captivity, in prison, and so forth. And the very end of that, we'll quote this again later, Micaiah quits talking to Jehoshaphat and Ahab and looks around at the people and says, listen to me, people. Listen to me, all of you. Because he's warning them it's about to happen to them. And of course, Ahab dies in that battle. Then we'd already talked about Micah saving the life of Jeremiah. So then we're going to say, okay, he saw concerning the visions he saw, right? The prophecy he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. And Samaria, of course, is the capital of the northern kingdom, and Jerusalem is the capital of the southern kingdom. And so he predicts both. So he says, hear, all you people, listen, O earth, and all it contains, and let the Lord be witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. Now that word hear is hear intelligently. In other words, sharpen up, listen to this. And then he says, all peoples, and this is what Micaiah said. 1 Kings 22:28, Micaiah said, if you indeed return safely, the Lord hasn't spoken by me. And then he said, listen, all you people. And that's exactly what his namesake says. Micah says, listen, all people. Because don't forget, Micah is now prophesying against the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom and the world around him. So he says, listen. All right, now, so we said before that we got Micah predicting during the reigns of these southern kings, but also during the reigns of these northern. Okay, now I just screwed up there. So we're going to go forward. So, all right, next. Then we go to the word listen. It means prick up the ears, hearken. And so what he's doing is he's warning them that the thing that I'm telling you, just like Micah warned both northern and southern, I am warning both northern and southern, these things are going to happen. For he says, behold, the Lord is coming forth from his place. He will come down and tread on the high places of the earth. The mountains will melt under him. The valleys will be split, like wax before the fire, like water poured down a steep place. So what Wiersbe says is that word coming forth is the same word that you would use in a battle. The Lord is coming forth. In other words, the Lord's coming forth to battle. And so what he's saying is, I've had enough, and I'm coming after you, and it's going to happen. And then it says, tread on the high places of earth. Now, Amos used this same concept. It says this in Amos 4:13. For behold, he who forms the mountains, creates the winds, declares to men what are his thoughts, who makes dawn into darkness and treads on the high places of the earth. The Lord God of hosts is his name. So Amos represents Jehovah also as a mighty conqueror. And so what he's saying in this whole passage is Micah is saying the same thing that Amos said a few years before. The Lord of hosts is coming, and he's going to take battle, and be ready for it. So why? But he says this, that all this is for the rebellion of Jacob and for the sins of the house of Israel. Well, what is the rebellion of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? Well, what is the high place of Judah? Is it not Jerusalem? So he's saying rebellion. It's a word which means revolt. And excuse me, it says this in, this is a great site, perceptaustin.org is wonderful. Just a tremendous group of multiple authors and preachers, and it's just wonderful. And it says this, rebellion is inherent in the word pesha. The word rebellion is ugly and describes open, usually unsuccessful defiance or resistance to an established government, or in this case, God. An open and avowed renunciation of the authority of God to whom we owe his allegiance. Do we understand that this is what we do when we willfully choose to sin against a law and a commandment that we clearly know? Now, if you go back up to, for example, Samaria, again and again and again, they were warned, this is what you should do, this is what you should not do. And then Judah, in spite of all the bad stuff that was going to happen to Samaria, Judah was following right along and doing the same thing. Ahaz was one of the worst kings that Judah ever had, and took them in the same direction as Israel was going. So he says, where's the high place? First of all, he starts with the sin, habitual sin. And then it says, what is the high place? Now look at that. What is the high place of Judah? The high place is where you worship idols. And where are those idols found? They're found in Jerusalem. So the northern kingdom, Israel, had really been going wrong. Judah was following it, and that's why Micah was predicting hard against both north and south. So as we go on here, what we're looking at is Micah predicted during the reign of Ahaz. So as you look here on the right-hand side of this chart, go north of Ahaz and you see Uzziah. Uzziah was a wonderful king that followed the Lord, and then he sinned and God punished him. Ahaz was a horrible king that brought a lot of idols into Jerusalem, and Hezekiah had the revival after him. Dead center in Micah's reign, or Micah's prophecy, was Ahaz. And so what he's saying is, if you look to the left, he's seeing that the northern kingdom was in the process of getting into captivity because of all their sins, and now the southern kingdom was heading in the same direction. So the high place, the sin that was going on there. So he says this, I will make Samaria, so now we're going back up north and we're looking at the capital. I will make Samaria a heap of ruins in the open country, planting places for a vineyard. Well, G. Vernon McGee, man, he's something. So he was giving his real life stories, and he said, that's what I saw today. So he and his wife were over in Israel and looking at various areas, and the next three quotes are from him about what he saw there. And one of the things he said was, I saw a little vineyard planted by the Arabs go right in the ruins of one section of Samaria. So the city of Samaria, because Samaria can mean a city or it can mean an area. But in talking about the city of Samaria, J. Vernon McGee said, I was there. Yeah, they're planting vineyards in Samaria. And then it says, I will pour her stones down into the valley. And he said, I stood on the Acropolis, the very highest part of Samaria, and looked down a steep embankment. You know what's down there? All kinds of pillars and stones that had been formerly hewn out and used in buildings. They had been rolled down into the valley. And then he says, and I will lay bare her foundations. Remember, Ahab and Jezebel lived in Samaria. And so he said, I'd like to show you the picture they took of the foundations that were there from the time of Ahab and Jezebel. So God had said, it's going to happen. Now, don't forget, it hasn't happened yet in Micah's time. But it was going to happen in the middle of Micah's time. In other words, what Micah was saying about Samaria in the beginning of his ministry transpired in the middle of his ministry. So Micah was within years of predicting this is what's going to happen. He said all of her idols will be smashed. All of her earnings, will be burned with fire. All her images I will make desolate, for she collected from the harlot's earnings, and the earnings of a harlot they'll return. So basically, if you think about it, now they have this temple that worships another god or some god. And if you worship that god, he should keep you safe, right? He's a god. Well, so the prostitutes get the money, give it over to the temple, and they turn things into gold and silver and things like that. Well, guess what the Assyrians wanted? The gold, the silver, and everything else. So they come in, destroy their gods, take their offerings, and then they go and offer it to their God. The Lord is in charge. So he said, because of this, I must lament and wail. I must go barefoot and naked. I must make a lament like the jackals in the mourning of the ostriches. Who's this? This is Micah. Remember when Jesus was in the city of Jerusalem and he looked out over the city and he cried. And he said, I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you. I wanted to gather you like chicken gathers her chicks under her wing, but you wouldn't have it. And here's Micah giving them the word of the Lord, knowing that death was going to occur, knowing that people were going to be hurt, and it broke him down. So he's given the word of the Lord, but at the same time he's got the cry of Jesus himself later on. He said, I must lament and wail. I must go barefoot and naked. I must lament like the jackals in the mourning of the ostriches. Now, the mourning of the ostriches is pretty interesting because I didn't know this. Again, J. Vernon McGee. He says, I didn't know the ostriches mourn until several years ago. My wife and I were visiting San Diego Zoo. We were walking around. We heard a mournful sound. It was very plaintive and a pitiful sort of sound. At first, I thought an animal had been trapped or hurt in some way. But soon we walked around the bend in the road, and there were the ostriches. They were all just standing there, just looking around. I didn't see any reason for their mourning, but they were making the most mournful sound I've ever heard. Micah said he would mourn like the ostriches. He would wail like they did. Well, this came from Atlantic Magazine. And what he says is the ostrich emits several sounds, the best known of which is the muffled roar known as the boom or the broom, which is uttered by the male bird, either as a challenge to the rival or a love note. The sound is divided into three utterances, the first two being short and the third long, with an interval about a second between. And it's generated by a curious manner. The bird shuts its beak so tightly that no air can escape, then empties the lung into the esophagus through the larynx, inflating the neck for a greater extent. The air flows backward over the vocal cords. It's been compared to mourning by the prophet of Micah. And at certain distance, with some of the elements subdued, it conveys a mournful suggestion. I never knew that. Interesting. So Micah is saying, this just breaks me up. It hurts me. I'm mourning like an ostrich because my people are going to be hurt, and they're going to be hurt bad. For her wound is incurable, for it has come to Judah. It has reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Now this is important. So I want to show you what we're talking about. Here is Jerusalem and Morsheth Gath, and I'm going to put my marker on it. So we're saying here is Jerusalem, and then here's the Morsheth Gath. Now, what Micah is doing is warning them that there is a calamity coming on them, and it's coming on strong, and it's coming on fast. And it says that they're not going to get away from it, and that the tragedy is coming even to Jerusalem. Now, we know that that is going to come from the Assyrians. Remember that Micah predicted at the very end of the northern kingdom when the Assyrians came in and took them out. And so what he's saying is it's going to happen. So that's the northern kingdom. That's up here. But what he's warning is that Jerusalem is going to be affected. Now, let me go over here and make a circle. And so over here, this is where Nineveh is. And so what you would assume is that the Sennacherib and crew would come in, take care of the northern kingdom, and then come down and get everybody. But that's not what happened. And I want to wash this away quickly. That's not what happened. What happened was that Sennacherib realized that although they had captured a lot of the territory, the people were joining together and going against the Assyrians. So he decided he's going to take a different route. So I'm going to take this guy and erase this one, and I want to show you what he did. What he did was, again, let's assume that this is where he is. I got the wrong one. Let me do this way. Let's assume he's way over here. But what he did was he came this way and then took out Tyre, Sidon, and anybody that wanted to fight with him. Came all the way down, and then he worked in these cities first before they went to Jerusalem. And so what this verse is saying is that he is about to come down and go to the gates of the city of Jerusalem. So as we look at verses 10 and further, you're going to find that Sennacherib does exactly that. What's going to happen, and I want to come over to this map over here, is these cities here, Lachish, Gath, Morsheth Gath, all these are mentioned in the next verses. And any place that we can identify the other cities, they're also going to be found in this area. And so in the Book of Chronicles, you'll find that what he did, he being Sennacherib, was he came in and he destroyed so many of these cities in the plain area, ended up stopping at Lachish and fighting with Lachish. And while he was fighting with Lachish, he sent his people up to Jerusalem to talk to or to threaten Hezekiah. And so everything that Micah was predicting was going to happen within a very, very short period of time. So I want to get you two pieces of information. Here's one. 2 Chronicles chapter 32 is one that you want to take a look at. Now what I want to do is hit the button one more time, explain something. So let me clear that. Okay, so here's what we got going. Micah predicted from here to here. Micah also predicted during this pine right here. And so in chapter 1, which is where we are, Micah says Assyrians are coming, and they're going to come to where? The gate of the city. And so what happened is, as they came down and destroyed all of these, then they went south further. I'm going to come over here. They came down, they took out the northern, kept on going, then took out all these cities, and then sent the envoy up to Jerusalem during the time of Hezekiah. And that's what he's saying up here. Her wound is incurable. It's come to Judah. It's reached the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. And that's exactly what happened. That's our man. Now, what you're going to see here is a whole series of cities. And as we said earlier, that these cities are located in the plain area around Lachish and Gath. But he's going to run a series of puns, and these are not funny. These are not joke puns. These are just taking the name of the city, which has a specific type of translation, and then using it to warn them. So it says, tell it not to Gath. So here, let me change my colors. So here it's saying, tell it not to Gath. Well, what does Gath mean? Gath means to tell. Weep not at all. Basically, he's taking a play on this and saying, you're going to get destroyed. You're going to be gone. Don't be proud. It's going to happen. Look at this one. This means house of dust, right? And what's going to happen? He says, roll yourself in the dust. That's always a sense of mourning, and because that's what's going to happen. So even though Hosea and Amos have predicted the death of the northern kingdom, what Micah is doing is saying, look, it's not just going to happen in the northern kingdom. It is going to happen in the southern kingdom. And these are southern kingdom towns. The next one he goes, go on your way to Shapher. And Shapher means pleasant. So what's it saying? Well, your name is pleasant, but you're going to be going in shameful nakedness. Because that's what the Assyrians did. They stripped people down. You marched out in nakedness. They took everything, and they shamed their captives. Inhabitants of Zanan does not escape. So Zanan means to come out. They weren't escaping. They were not coming out. The lamentation of Beth Ezel, which means adjoining house. He's going to take away from you its support. In other words, the adjoining house means the two supported each other. He's pulling that support out of there. The inhabitant of Merath, which means bitter. You're going to become weak, waiting for the good, because the calamity has come down from the Lord, right? It's coming from him. If we go to the next one, what we're seeing here, it says, harness the chariots to a team of horses, O inhabitant of Lachish. Lachish. Let me go back and pick this up again. Lachish. And Lachish means team of horses. Now, one of the reasons that Sennacherib was at Lachish before he went to Jerusalem is this was a strong military town. That's really what it was known for. And so he was in the process of destroying that town before he went up to the next big one, which would have been Jerusalem. But he's saying, harness chariots, guys, but you don't have it. You're not going to win. And then it says he was the beginning. Let me erase this and show you something here. He says, she was the beginning of sin to the daughter of Zion, and because in you were found the rebellious acts of Israel. We're not sure when that happened, but it's very evident that from Lachish came the beginnings of sin into the southern kingdom. But we don't have a recording as to what happened there. Therefore, you will give parting gifts on behalf of Moresheth. This is his town. This is the town that Micah is from. And so Micah is saying, uh, my town, which is known to be a gift or dowry, giving gifts. Yeah, we're going to be giving parting gifts. Everything we own is gone. This is one of the reasons that Micah was just crying out in agony and compassion, because his own town was going to get destroyed. And the Lord had given him the responsibility of telling the world, my own town, along with others, are getting destroyed. And then it says the house of deception, they'll become a deception. Apparently, somebody had trusted this town to help, and that town wasn't going to be able to help. And then the last one here, moreover, I will bring on you the one who takes possession. He's going to bring on this town, the one who will take possession. Well, what's the name of this? It's the name Conqueror. And what he's saying is, I'm going to bring a conqueror against you. So you can see that what he's doing is making this very clear, very personal with this town, to show them, and with this area, to show this is real. This is going to happen. And so the last verse is actually very, very, very sad. It says, make yourself bald and cut off your hair. Why? That's a sign of mourning, tremendous mourning. Why? Because the children of your delight are gone. So what you see here is something that is, I think, very noteworthy for us. What you see is Micah doing exactly what he was told to do, warning the people that needed to be warned, telling them what was going to go on, because it was his responsibility. He was a prophet. At the same time, he had a heart. He had a compassion. And he cared what was happening to these people. You know, sometimes I'll listen to a fire and brimstone message, and I don't hear the heart of the speaker. And I should hear the heart of the speaker. The fire and brimstone message is from the Lord. It's very real. It's going to happen. He's predicted it would happen. So it's a true prediction. But the heart of the people should be there, where we're talking to someone and crying out to them and saying, I wish you would come. I don't want you to be hurt. Even though they may be living a life that's totally sinful, and they know it's sinful, and they don't want to get away from it. I'm hoping, I'm praying that that person comes to the Lord and doesn't go there, as opposed to decking them in a verbal sense, and I've seen it too much. Micah predicted more than, and you'll see this later in the book, he predicts more than Hosea or Amos as to the far future. But Micah knew that the near future was going to be horrendous for his people, and he had a compassion for them, which is the same thing that Jesus had, wish that we had. So I wanted to close with that. I'm going to change the slide right now and go to the very end. And I want to check something first. Got it. And this is a slide that you might want to keep up on your screen. You know, hit pause and watch this for a bit, because what this is what we talked about earlier. Micah is Isaiah in miniature. And what you might want to do is look up Micah 1:2, and then go over to Isaiah 1:2. Look up Micah 1:9 through 16, then go over to Isaiah 10 through 28:32, and just see how that he really is the miniature. But with that, I thank you, and we're going to put this one to bed.